Welcome to Billerica Public Library's Book Buzz July publication. Enjoy as I go over some hot off the presses July releases that are owned by Billerica Public Library and Merrimack Consortium. Billerica Public Library staff hopes that you will enjoy some of these exciting and interesting titles. Our first genre is contemporary fiction. Instamom by Chanel Garten. It's the influencer's golden rule. Know your niche. Kit Kidding has found hers on Instagram, where she gets paid to promote brands and share expertly written posts about her fun, fabulous, child-free life. Kit likes kids just fine, but she passionately believes that women who choose not to become mothers shouldn't have to face guilt or judgment, or really hot chefs who turn out to be single dads. Will McGregor is aggravating, sexy, persistent, averse to social media, and definitely a bad idea. As soon as Kit learns his parroting status, she vows to put this scorching one-night stand behind her and move on. But Will and Kit are thrown together on an Instagram campaign, and the more time she spends with him and his whip-smart 8-year-old daughter, Addie, the more difficult it is to stay away, much less sustain what Will so cleverly calls her resting beach face. Kit's picture-perfect career path is suddenly crashing with the possibility of a different future, messy, complicated, and real. Which life does she truly want? Will she have to reinvent herself? And will love still be waiting by the time she figures it out? The Startup Wife by Tamima Anam. Brilliant coder and professor of Pi Tattoo, Asia is poised to revolutionize artificial intelligence when she is reunited with her high school crush, Cyrus Jones. Cyrus inspires Asia to write a new algorithm. Before she knows it, she's abandoned her PhD program. They exchange vows and go to work at an exclusive tech incubator called Utopia. The platform creates a sensation with millions of users seeking personalized rituals every day. Will Cyrus and Asha's marriage survive the pressures of sudden fame, or will she become overshadowed by the man everyone is calling the new Messiah? While We Were Dating by Jasmine Gilroy. Ben Stevens has never bothered with serious relationships. He has plenty of casual dates to keep him busy. Family drama he's trying to ignore and his advertising job to focus on. When Ben lands a huge ad campaign featuring movie star Anna Gardner, however, it's hard to keep it purely professional. Anna is not just gorgeous and sexy, she's also down to earth and considerate, and he can't help flirting a little. Anna is on a mission to make herself a household name, and this ad campaign will be a great distraction while she waits to hear if she's booked her next movie. However, she didn't expect Ben Stevens to be her biggest distraction. She knows mixing business with pleasure never works out, but why not indulge in a harmless flirtation? But their lighthearted banter takes a turn for the serious when Ben helps Anna in a family emergency, and they reveal truths about themselves to each other and truths they barely shared with those closest to them. When the opportunity comes to turn their real-life fling into something more for the Hollywood spotlight, will Ben be content to play the background role in Anna's life and leave when the cameras start rolling? Or could he be the leading man she needs to craft their own Hollywood ending? Our second genre is historical fiction. The Forests of Vanishing Stars by Kristen Hamel. After being stolen from her wealthy German parents and raised in an unforgiving wilderness of Eastern Europe, a young woman finds herself alone in 1941 after her kidnapper dies. Her solitary existence is interrupted, however, when she happens upon a group of Jews fleeing the Nazi terror. Stunned to learn what's happening in the outside world, she vows to teach the group all she can about surviving in the forest, and in turn, they teach her some surprising lessons about opening her heart after years of isolation. But when she is betrayed and escapes into a German-occupied village, her past and present come together in a shocking conclusion that could change everything. All the Little Hopes by Leah West. Deep in tobacco land of North Carolina, nothing's been the same since the boys shipped off to war and worry took their place. 13-year-old Lucy Brown is precocious and itching for adventure. Then Allie Burrett Tucker wanders into town, an outcast with a puzzling past. And Lucy figures the two of them can solve any curious crime they find, just like her hero Nancy Drew. Their chance comes when the man goes missing, a woman stops speaking, and an eccentric gives the girls a mystery to solve that takes them beyond the ordinary. Their quiet town, seasoned with honeybees and sweet tea, becomes home to a Nazi prisoner of war camp. More men go missing, and together the girls embark on a journey to discover if we really know who the enemy is. The War Nurse by Tracy Wood. Superintendent of Nurses Julia Simpson must recruit 64 nurses to relieve the battle-worn British, months before American troops are ready to be deployed. She knows that the young nurses serving near the front lines will face challenging situations, but nothing could have prepared her for the chaos that awaits when they arrive at British Base Hospital 12 in Rouen, France. The primitive conditions, an ineffective system, horrific battle wounds are enough to discourage the most hardened nurses, and Julia can do nothing but lead by example, even as the military doctors undermine her authority and make her question her very place in a hospital tent. When trainloads of soldiers stricken by a mysterious respiratory illness arrive one after the other, overwhelming the hospital's limited resources and threatening the health of her staff, Julia faces an unthinkable choice: to step aside the bounds of her profession and risk the career she has fought so hard for, or to watch the people she cares for most die in her arms. The Truth of the Covenant by Norman Locke. Best known for his novel, The Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne was burdened by familiar shame, which began with his great-great-grandfather John, the infamously unrepentant Salem witch trial judge. We witness Hawthorne writing a tale entitled Truth of the Covenant, in which he sends his fictional surrogate, Isaac Page, back to the year 1692 to save Bridget Bishop, the first person executed for witchcraft, and rescue the other victims from execution. But when Page puts on Hawthorne's spectacles, his worldview is transformed and he loses his resolve. As he battles his conscience, he finds that his own life is hanging in a balance. Our third genre is science fiction. Appleseed by Matt Bell. In 18th century Ohio, two brothers travel into the wooded frontier, planting apple orchards from which they plan to profit in the years to come. As they remake the wilderness in their own image, planning for a future of settlement and civilization, the long-held bonds and secrets between the two will be tested, fractured and broken, and possibly healed. 50 years from now, in the second half of the 21st century, climate change has ravaged the earth. Having invested early in genetic engineering and food science, one company now owns all the world's resources. But a growing resistance is working to redistribute both land and power. And in a pivotal moment for the future humanity, one of the company's original founders will return to headquarters, intending to destroy what he helped build. 8,000 years in the future, North America is covered by a massive sheet of ice. One lonely being inhabits a tech station on the top of the glacier, and in a daring and seemingly impossible quest, sets out to follow a homing beacon across the continent in hopes of discovering the last bit of civilization. Joker Moon by George R.R. Martin. Theodorus was a dreamer. As a child, he dreamt of airplanes, rockets, and outer space. When the wildcard virus touched him and transformed him into a monstrous snail senator weighing several tons, his boyhood dreams seemed out of reach. But a Witherspoon is not so easily defeated. Years and decades passed, and Theodorus grew to maturity and came into his fortune, but still his dream endured. But now, when he looked upward into the night sky, he saw more than just the moon. He saw a Joker homeland, a refuge where outcast children of the wild card could make a place of their own. safe from hate and harm. An impossible dream, some said. Others, alarmed by the prospect, brought all their power to bear to oppose them. The adorers persisted, never dreaming that the moon was already inhabited, and the moon maid did not want company. The Past is Red by Catherine Valenti. The future is blue, endless blue, except for a few small places that float across the hot, drowned world left behind by long-gone fossil fuel guzzlers. One of those patches is a magical place called Garbage Town. Tetley is the most beloved girl in Garbage Town, but she's the only one who knows it. She's the only one who knows a lot of things. That Garbage Town is the most wonderful place in the world, and it's full of hope that you can love someone and 66% hate them all at the same time. But the earth is a terrible mess. Hope is a fragile thing, and a lot of people are very angry with her. Then Tetley discovers a new friend, a terrible secret, and more to her world than she ever expected. Our fourth genre is suspense and mystery. Such a Quiet Place by Megan Miranda. We had no warning that she'd come back. Hollow's Edge used to be a quiet place, a private and idyllic neighborhood where neighbors dropped in on neighbors, celebrated graduation and holiday parties together, and looked out for one another. But then came the murder of Brandon and Fiona Truitt. A year and a half later, Hollow's Edge is simmering. The residents are trapped, unable to sell their homes, confronted daily by the empty Truitt house, and suffocated by their trial testimonies that implicated one of their own, Ruby Fletcher. And now Ruby's back. With her conviction overturned, Ruby waltzes right back to Hollow's Edge and into home she once shared with Harper Nash. Harper, 5 years older, has always treated Ruby like a wayward younger sister, but now she's terrified. What possible good can come out of Ruby returning to the scene of the crime? And how can she possibly turn it away when she knows Ruby has nowhere to go? Within days, suspicion spreads like a virus across Hollow's Edge. It's increasingly clear that not everyone told the truth about the night of the Truitt's murder. And when Harper begins to receive threatening notes, she realizes she has to uncover the truth before someone else becomes the killer's next victim. Falling by T.J. Newman. You've just boarded a flight to New York. There are 143 other passengers on board. What you don't know is that 30 minutes before the flight, your pilot's family was kidnapped. For his family to live, everyone on your plane must die. The only way the family will survive is if the pilot follows his orders and crashes the plane. Enjoy the flight. The Grandmother Plot by Caroline Cooney. Freddie leads a life of little responsibility. His mother is dead, his sisters are far flung across the globe, and he can't quite work up enough motivation to find himself a girlfriend. Freddie has been forced to place his beloved grandmother, now deep in dementia, in a nursing home. Freddie visits her often, cherishing and also hating the time he spends with the grandmother he's always adored, and now a ghost of her former self. When a fragile old woman already close to death is murdered in that nursing home, Freddie panics. His sources of income are iffy, as his friends, and he has to keep his grandmother safe, keep himself anonymous, and keep the police out of his life, or the complications could become deadly. The Temple House Banishing by Rachel Donahue. Perched high atop a seaside cliff in Ireland, a lonely Victorian mansion is home to the Temple House School. And at Temple House, nothing is ever as it seems. Louisa is the new brilliant scholarship student, finding most of the other students at the all-girls Catholic boarding school as icy and unfamiliar as the drafty mansion. She forms a fierce bond with the intense and compelling Victoria, an outlier. Their close bond is soon unsettled by the young, charismatic art teacher, Mr. Laval, igniting tension and obsession in the cloistered world of the school. Then one day, Louisa and Mr. Laval disappear. There is no trace of either one. It's the unsolved mystery that captivates the whole country. Year after year, the media revisit it and the conspiracy theories persist. Now, on the 25th anniversary, a journalist, a woman who grew up on the same street as Louisa, delves into the past to write a series of articles and to uncover the truth. She finds stories of jealousy and revenge, power and class. But will she find Louisa and Mr. Laval too? Steel Fear by Brendan Webb and John David Mann. The moment Navy SEAL Sniper Finn sets a foot on the USS Abraham Lincoln to hitch a ride home from the Persian Gulf, it's clear something is deeply wrong. Leadership is weak, morale is low, and when crew members start disappearing one by one, what at first seems like a random string of suicides soon reveals something far more sinister. There's a serial killer on board. Suspicion falls on Flynn, the newcomer to the ship. After all, he's being sent home in disgrace, recalled from the field under a dark cloud of a mission gone horribly wrong. He's also a lone wolf, hunted by gaps in his memory and the elusive sense that something he missed may have contributed to the civilian's death on the last assignment. Finding the killer offers a chance at redemption if he can stay alive long enough to prove it isn't him. The Bone Code by Kathy Reichs. On the way to the hurricane-ravaged Isle of Palms, a barrier island off of South Carolina coast, Temp receives a call from the Charlestown coroner. The storm has tossed ashore a medical waste container. Inside are two decomposed bodies wrapped in plastic sheeting and bound with electrical wire. Temp recognizes many of the details as identical to those of an unsolved case she handled in Quebec years earlier. With a growing sense of foreboding, she travels to Montreal to gather evidence. Meanwhile, the health authorities in South Carolina become increasingly alarmed as a human flesh-eating contagion spreads. So focused is Temp on identifying the container victims that initially she doesn't register how their murders and the pestilence may be related. But she does recognize one unsettling fact. Someone is protecting a dark secret and willing to do anything to keep it hidden. The Very Nice Box by Laura Blackett and Eve Gleichman. Ava Simon designs storage boxes for Stata, a slick Brooklyn-based furniture company. She's hardworking, obsessive, and heartbroken from a tragedy that killed her girlfriend and upended her life. It's been years since she's let anyone in. But when Ava's new boss, the young magnetic Matt Putnam, offers Ava a ride home one afternoon, an unlikely relationship blossoms. Ava remembers how rewarding it can be to open up, and despite her instincts, she becomes enamored. But Matt isn't who he claims to be, and the romance takes a sharp turn. Fallen by Linda Castillo. When a young woman is found murdered in Painter's Mill Motel, Chief of Police Kate Burkholder is shocked to discover she once knew the victim. Rachel Schwartz was a charming but troubled Amish girl who left the fold years ago and fled Painter's Mill. Why was she back in town, and who would kill her so brutally? Kate remembers Rachel as the only girl who was as bad at being Amish as Kate was, and those parallels dog her. But the more Kate learns about Rachel's life, the more she's convinced that her dubious reputation was deserved. As a child, Rachel was a rowdy rule breaker whose decisions to leave devastated her parents and best friend. As an adult, she was charismatic and beautiful and a rabble-rouser with a keen eye for opportunity no matter who got in her way. Her no-holds-barred lifestyle earned her a lot of love and enemies aplenty, both English and Amish. As the case heats to a fever pitch and long-buried secrets resurface, a killer haunts Painter's Mill. Someone doesn't want Rachel's past or the mysteries she took with her to the grave coming to light. As Kate digs deeper, violence strikes again, and this time hitting close to home. Will Kate uncover the truth and bring a murderer to justice, or will a killer bent on protecting a terrible past stop her once and for all and let the fallen be forgotten? Our last genre is nonfiction. Couple Found Slain by Makita Brotman. On February 21st, 1992, 22-year-old Brian Bechtel walked into a police station in Port St. Joe, Florida, and confessed that he shot and killed his parents in their family home in Silver Spring, Maryland. He said he'd been possessed by the devil. He was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia and ruled not criminally responsible for the murders on grounds of insanity. But after the trial, where do the criminally insane go? Brotman reveals Brian's inner life leading up to murder, as well as his complicated afterlife in a maximum security psychiatric hospital, where he is neither imprisoned nor free. During his 27 years at the hospital, Brian has tried to escape, been shot by police, and has witnessed 3 patient-on-patient murders. He's experienced the drugging of patients beyond recognition, a sadistic system of rewards and punishments, and the short-lived reign of a crazed doctor turned stalker. The Case of the Murderous Dr. Cream by Dean Job. When a doctor does go wrong, he is the first of criminals, Sherlock Holmes observed during one of his most baffling investigations. He has nerve and he has knowledge. In the span of 15 years, Dr. Thomas Neil Cream murdered as many as 10 people in the United States, Britain, and Canada. A death toll with almost no precedent. Poison was his weapon of choice. Largely forgotten today, this villain was brazen as the notorious Jack the Ripper. Structured around the doctor's London murder trial in 1892, when he was finally brought to justice, the case of the murderous Dr. Cream exposes the blind trust given to medical practitioners, as well as the flawed detection methods, bungled investigations, corrupt officials, and stifling morality of the Victorian society that allowed Dr. Cream to prey on vulnerable and desperate women, many of whom he had turned to him for medical help. Yoke, My Yoga of Self-Acceptance by Jasmine Stanley. In Sanskrit, yoga means to yoke. To yoke mind, body, movement, breath, light, dark, the good and the bad. The larger idea of yoke is what Jasmine Stanley calls the yoga of every day. A yoga that is just not about perfecting your downward dog, but about applying the hard lessons learned on the mat to even harder daily project of living. In a series of deeply honest, funny autobiographical essays, Jasmine explores everything from imposter syndrome to cannabis to why it's a full-time job loving yourself, all through the lens of yoke. She calls out American yoga complex that prefers debating the merits of cotton versus polyblend leggings rather than owning up to its overwhelmness whiteness. She questions why the Western take on yoga so often misses or misuses the traditional spiritual dimension and reveals what she calls her own whole-ass problematic. Growing up in Bali, loving astrology, learning to meditate, and finding prana in music. And in the end, Jasmine invites every reader to find the authentic spirit of yoke, linking that good and the bad, that light and that dark. Blind Men's Bluff by James Tate Hill. At age 16, James Tate Hill was diagnosed with Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, a condition that left him legally blind. When high school friends stopped calling and a disability counselor advised him to aim for C's in his classes, he tried to escape the stigma by pretending he could still see. In this unfailing, candid yet humorous memoir, Hill discloses the tricks he employed to pass for sighted. From displaying shelves of paperbacks he read on tape to arriving early on first dates so women would have to find him. He risked his life every time he crossed the street, doing his best to listen for approaching cars. A good memory and pop culture obsessions like Tom Cruise, Prince, and all things 1980s allowed him to steer conversations toward common experiences. For 15 years, Hill hid his blindness from friends, colleagues, and lovers, even convincing himself that if he stayed long enough, his blurry vision would bring the world into focus. At 30, faced with stalled writing career, crumbling marriage, and a growing fear of leaving his apartment, he began to wonder if there was a better way.